All right. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. We're very excited to have you as part of our Signal and Story series. This is the third and final conversation in the series, although we've got some great plans for what's going to come next. But just want to start things off by saying thanks again for carving time out of your day to be with us. Why don't we start today just by having you introduce yourself and giving us a little bit of your professional background?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to, and thanks for having me today. Thrilled to be here. Hopefully, I have some interesting things to say for the crew that watches. I'm a contractor, consultant, fractional lead in the e-commerce and digital marketing space. I have been in this space now for 21 years. Worked on some brands that folks will have heard of: Hanes, Wrangler, Nautica. I worked for Citigroup, Barnes and Noble, Estee Lauder, a lot of Estee Lauder brands, including MAC Cosmetics. Some time with some smaller companies you may have heard of, FSA Store, Tile Bar, and Land's End, and had a short period of time in PE. So I've got a little PE experience as well. I came up in e-commerce when one person did everything. So that gives me an advantage in that I've touched just about everything at least once. And it came into the space well before things start to specialize and get very specific. And, before there was such a term as performance marketing.
Yeah.
And I started as a brand marketer. So I've got that foundational traditional CPG marketing background to help all of the marketing efforts be that much more effective.
Terrific. Well, it sounds like you've certainly seen a lot, done a lot across a wide spectrum of industries and verticals. You touched on it right there at the end about performance marketing and kind of that dynamic space that we're in right now. And I'd be curious to ask you, what do you find most exciting and challenging as well, I suppose, about leading teams in the performance marketing space?
Yeah, so I think today there is a continued amount of pressure on companies and staffing and teams for delivering value. And what I've seen in the last year and a half is a lot of roles being downgraded and kind of a swath of levels that are SVP, C suite, VP, companies trying to do things cheaper. And so, in many cases, eliminating those roles and hiring lower level staff, which is fine. I don't think this is the case of AI can do this person's job
Hmm.
yet. But one thing AI can't do is lead teams and mentor.
Yeah,
So,
and I think companies are learning that in real
yes,
time the hard way in a lot of
yeah.
instances. Yeah.
And so there's a place for that in the structure of an organization. And when you remove that layer, very often you do have very talented people at the senior director, senior manager level who are pushing very hard on their businesses, waking up every day and giving it their all, but often feel that the strategic guidance and the mentorship is missing. What a casualty of that may be that companies lose some talent, um, as talent gets frustrated with some of those areas that are missing that layer does provide. So that's what I've seen in the last year and a half, 2 years, that I think is impacting how teams are being led today across the e-com and performance marketing space.
Yeah, and you're touching on a lot, at least in terms of the AI element that I know we're gonna want to talk about a little bit more in depth in a little bit. Let me kind of go into your experience in terms of the team structure. And when you're building or you're managing or you're working with a team that's shipping a lot of creative and needing to at scale and speed. Tell me, like, what are your non-negotiables? Whether it's in structure or it's process or it's ethos, mindset. What do you think is really the most important part when it comes to the creative output and ensuring that that quality remains even when the pace of everything seems to be accelerating around it?
Yeah, and I'll talk to more than just the creative output because I think the analytics are always an important element in terms of how you're optimizing and pushing forward. Well, I'll touch on structure, process, and mindset. And I don't really have any hard non negotiables. Maybe I do when it comes to mindset. But I think as far as structure, there is a lot of work put into selecting the right agency for your company and brand,
Mm.
something that I help clients with. There is a very fine balance, and it takes a level of finesse to manage an agency properly, to be a good partner to them, at the same time push them to deliver their very best for you while knowing they're doing the same for other clients at the same time. So that takes a level of finesse and a fine balance. There's also the question for companies as they grow is when to take performance marketing in house. There's a lot of good talent out there, and so for many companies, that's a good and smart option. In terms of process, this is going to come as no surprise to anyone. The internal collaboration in terms of delivering creative when creative is done by an in-house brand team is critical and important, and you just have to establish those proper processes and frameworks to make sure that what the consumer sees is what represents the brand and also pushes your business commercially. The mindset one is probably the only one that might be a non-negotiable for me when I hire internal staff. I hire for three things. I hire for an innate curiosity about the business, because the thing about digital marketing, performance marketing, is it's changing constantly. So after you've worked a 10 to 12-hour days, you still have to be doing things and thinking about your business and looking at social and looking at new ad formats. And if you don't have that natural curiosity, you're going to be burnt out when things change 3 months, 6 months down the. So I always hire for that natural curiosity and passion for the business and the craft. I hire for intelligence and I hire for an attitude. And in attitude, it's about kind of being all in.
Love that.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the only non-negotiable I have, is that mindset piece of the building teams question.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important piece, that, it's, do you have that hunger, that curiosity that you talk about, to really want to dig in and understand and be open to everything that's happening around you and bringing those new ideas to the table day in, day out. Because I agree with you that if you don't have that innate drive, you will burn out. Like,
Yeah,
I've seen
it
it,
will
you've
happen.
seen it. Yeah. So that's terrific. So we talk about the customer, we talk about the data, and kind of blending the mix, and you were just talking about wanting or needing to ensure that the consumer sees what all the internal brand team is trying to do behind the scenes. So what does it look like to you when a campaign gets it right? It has the data signal driving the foundation, but it's also telling a great story. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, the most recent example that comes to mind, I helped a client launch into direct mail. We did a very simple programmatic postcard. So we're taking audiences and retargeting site visitors and re-engaging cart abandoners and re-engaging, based on prospecting signals, building those audiences based on first party data. And the postcard itself, really had to both represent the brand. The brand's a premium brand, and so of course the imagery and aesthetic was very luxe and no offer, very very premium, but still had to do a good job of the foundations that relate to just good marketing, understanding what your consumer's really interested in and what's important to them in the purchase decision. And by that, I mean kind of underscoring what the unique selling proposition or reason for being is for the brand and why they should buy from this brand versus another. And I think the creative did execute well on that. And the results are coming in, and I was dead on in my ROAS projections, which I'm very proud of. And
Fantastic.
I think we're like 3 weeks in, and it looks really good so far. It looks like it's a
Terrific.
very positive and incremental channel for the business that they'll probably continue.
Terrific. So let's talk a little bit about AI.
Yeah,
And we've been talking with a lot of marketers from a lot of teams at various stages of AI integration, and we've called the early adopter. We've got the dabblers, we've got the decision makers, and we've got expert teams. Everyone's at like a different point in their journey, trying to figure out, what the heck do I do with this tool.
right.
Even advanced teams are admitting that they're underutilizing AI at the briefing stage. So I'm curious, do you see it as a valuable tool for writing a better brief, a more concise, a more targeted brief? And have you seen it help connect strategy to execution any more effectively or efficiently?
Yeah, I view it as a tool for efficiency when it comes to any written communication or copy that you might need for your business. More so as connecting strategy to execution. That said, if your prompts are very well written, you probably could get some output that does connect your strategy to execution. As always, human element is required with AI.
Well, you
You
know
know,
that.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a lot to the prompting, but things still have to be reviewed. I was working with a colleague who didn't know Kager formula, and he looked it up in AI, and I took one look at it and I said, "That's incorrect. You're going to get the wrong answer if you follow that," from my favorite AI tool, which will remain nameless. Um, So like the human element is very much a requirement, but I view it as an efficiency tool when it comes to copy in any writing. Like, why start with a blank Word doc when you can copy, paste, and adjust? You're just going to save tons and tons of time. So when brands say they're not using it fully for brief writing, for SEO copy, PDP copy, that's a head scratcher to me, because even their editors need to be using it to start with, and not be starting with that blank Word doc, in my humble opinion.
No, and I think as people become more comfortable and fluent in leveraging AI, that's an opinion that is increasingly shared. I mean, for what it's worth, that's been my experience as well. In that the productivity hack of AI is one of, if not its most valuable assets. It can't generate something incredible on its own, and you can easily spot when someone has just taken output from a generic prompt and pasted it into anything. Like, it's glaringly obvious, right? Um, so how do you think about the role of prompts then? Because this is an area that I love digging into personally. Like is it a technical skill? Is it a creative skill? Is it somewhere in between? Like, where do you see that falling?
It's such an interesting question. I actually posted on LinkedIn, like, the quality of your answer is going to depend on the question you ask. And this is true with AI and also true in life.
Yeah.
I had a challenge personally that, like, over 2 years, I was working on something, and the whole time I wasn't asking the right question. Right. And once I asked the right question, problem was suddenly doors opened
Right.
and magical things happened. And so the language element, I think, is creative. The content, I think, is more technical, but I do think, like all things e-commerce and performance marketing, it is a mix of both,
Hmm.
the technical and the creative.
Hmm.
I think as we all use AI in various aspects of our lives, our prompt skills are just going to naturally increase, because trial and error, you don't find what you're looking for. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, the big announcement today about ChatGPT and partnering with Shopify and the single item cart sales is going to be ads on Perplexity. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And I'm encouraging the brands I work with to start experimenting for first mover advantage and start to learn in those areas as much as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem like every day there's another announcement, there's another industry shift, there's something else for us to absorb and evolve alongside with. And it can feel overwhelming to keep up. But like you said, that's where that innate curiosity really comes to the table, the desire to just be all in and be like, yep, this is probably the most powerful tool available to us in our generation as marketers. And those who are willing to roll with it and figure it out as it goes will be the ones that succeed, and those that are more stuck in their own ways or averse or whatever it is, I think they're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts on AI specific roles.
Yes.
We've seen almost half of teams that would identify as like advanced AI users are now creating job descriptions that are AI forward. And I think there's a wide range of opinions on, is this a good idea or not, to kind of be leaning that far into it from a description standpoint. But does it live in creative ops? Does it live in performance? Should it be in every role now? And and should it really be in the description itself, or should this just be fluency, that you would expect anyone to bring to the table?
Yeah, the short answer is fluency in every role, and I'm harkening back to some work I did in 2024 for a portfolio company when I was working in private equity, and I built, a marketing organization for them. They had grown from 100 million to 1.2 billion in a year, right? So clearly, the marketing work they needed for 100 million versus 1.2 billion was completely different. So I built out their marketing organization. We did get to the point where we said, okay, with all of this headcount and cost, can any of these roles be replaced by AI? And we had a very advanced data science tool team over there. They looked at it and they're like, yeah, the answer is no. And I think even though that was a year and a half ago, I think the answer is still no. And I'm looking at it more as a tool. And I'm also thinking back to, like, when Google search first came out, right? And I was working for an engineering firm at the time, and there was a lot of fear, like, do we give employees access to the internet because they're going to screw around and not be working all day, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a tool. It's a better tool. It's a better mousetrap, but we all need to be using it, and it should be part of every role as an efficiency tool.
Yeah, and you said it, and I think there's a recurring theme here in that it is a tool to be leveraged and exploited for good, we would hope, but it's not a panacea. It cannot solve the problem, no matter what the problem is. And so finding the right balance of human intuition and emotional empathy and understanding alongside faster outputs is really what's going to separate the groups that succeed from the groups that don't. From a creative standpoint and a brand standpoint, this is something that I find really, really interesting. And I've been a brand marketer and a creative for most of my career. And so having access now, excuse me, to these tools is, as you can understand, revolutionary. It's a little scary, and it is abused and misused more times than it's actually used thoughtfully, in my opinion. But when you're talking about maintaining brand integrity at scale, when groups are beginning to push out a lot of AI generated creative, how do you avoid the bottlenecks of having so much creative now kind of at your disposal for review and implementation without sacrificing quality? How do you kind of maintain that core? I think back to your story about the group you were just working with, a luxury brand that has so much brand equity built into its ethos that it doesn't need to put an offer on the postcard for that postcard to be valid. So, how do you, in the era of AI, maintain those brand standards when you have the ability to push so much out so much faster?
And I think this goes back to in using AI, there's that required human element in there that absolutely has to be present, and you're relying on the talent of your creatives. Most of the brands I work with have internal creative brand teams who are exceptionally talented. And so even though there is AI generated creative that will blow your socks off and looks like the most expensive hotel in Mallorca and you just want to be there, right? They're not compromising on the brand ethos, the brand guide, the brand book, the brand tone, the brand look and feel. They're not compromising anywhere. And so having those talented creatives internally or externally and having their eyes and that level of kind of governance and control, I think is key to maintaining the branding.
I completely agree. So, couple more things to touch on here. Looking ahead to 2026, which is much closer than I would like to admit. What's one thing that teams should start doing now if they don't want to find themselves behind the eight ball in 12 or 18 months?
Oh my God, can I give you three? It's hard to
Please.
pick one.
Yes.
All right. So the first one's kind of obvious and I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but it's experimenting with AI in terms of advertising. And if you're on Shopify, trying to do something with purchases just so you can have that first mover advantage and learn, right? It always works with Google betas and meta betas. So you need to get in there and start to learn faster than your competition. I think the second is probably to focus on your talent and giving them the stuff of days of your succession planning, mentoring, guidance that's fallen out of favor with the focus on value from a corporate standpoint in many cases as companies, evolve and transform. I think people are people and they still need those things. One of my brands is doing a town hall and people are just starving for it. Doesn't take a ton of time and pays off in spades
Yep.
in
Agreed.
terms of morale, motivation, and overall output. The last thing I'll mention, since you gave me three instead of one, is experimenting with not only like I'll call it ad formats, in the case of AI, shopping formats like I just mentioned, is unifying away from Meta and Google as ad platforms and looking for incremental revenue streams. I already mentioned
Hmm.
direct mail.
Hmm.
There's a lot of partnerships out there that are upper funnel and mid funnel and lower funnel that can really bring incremental sales for brands. They take work in terms of finding them and setting them up and making sure they're executed properly. But I've been able to bring millions of dollars in incremental sales to clients in terms of working on just those initiatives that are brand right and effective and outside of the walled gardens of Google.
It's amazing how effective the humble direct mail piece can still be.
Oh my gosh. The very first business I ran was a heritage cataloger,
Uh huh.
and it was a
Yeah.
sizable e-com business. And, direct mail was viewed as so stodgy and old. And why would you do direct mail anymore? And the data that you're relying on and the RFM modeling is still used in programmatic display because it's so foundational and
Hmm.
effective.
Right. Right.
Worked for a company that had developed their own scoring model based on RFM. And 20 years after its invention, they're testing it versus some newfangled stuff, and it's still winning. It's still winning.
Yep.
So maybe because I grew up for a heritage cataloger, I'm a big fan of direct mail.
It's okay to be biased. That's okay. I mean, but I think the lesson still holds true is that tactics can still find their lanes. Nothing is ever fully replaced. And I think when the landscape shifts and there's a real tectonic move away from traditional media, as there was, we're going on several decades now where we've pushed really into digital first. There a present evergreen need for these traditional methods to just continue driving connection with the consumer.
And technology is evolving too, right? Like some of these tactics that are viewed as kind of old school, out of home, direct mail,
Right,
you've
right.
got even better data signals now at your disposal.
Right. Right, because you're not using it to blast the way that you were in their heyday. It's a much more targeted exercise. So you
Yeah,
do get much
so
better data.
so with the better data, I predict, direct mail is going to get more popular in the next 3 to 5 years. There's a lot of good partners out there that do it very well.
The kids are always into what's retro. That's always going to help out too. Well, Amy, before we wrap up here, I always like to toss in one hot take question that we don't send ahead of time.
Okay, let's do it. I'm
So,
game.
if you had to run a full campaign tomorrow, zero AI tools allowed, what would be the biggest surprise about how it turned out?
I don't know what the biggest surprise is going to be, but I do know that the surprises are why I stay in the business.
That is a
Meaning,
politician's pivot. Boy, I
no,
do.
no,
I
no.
love.
It's really not. Let me explain. It's really grounded in something real. Next thing anyone would ever call me is a what let me explain is that the exciting thing about digital is you have these heuristics and rules of thumbs that work most of the time, right? When you're
Right.
doing a campaign or you're doing right. And there's the foundational marketing pieces which work, right? You have to have knowing your unique selling proposition, knowing how to communicate effectively to the consumer, having a good handle, breaking through the clutter, all of that foundational marketing stuff, knowing your target consumer, etc. There's still surprises. Sometimes you run a test, you run a campaign, and you're like, wait, why did that happen? That's so interesting. I kind of live for those surprises. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm just as excited when I'm right.
Well, still human. I would expect so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I still am thrilled when I'm right, but I'm also like motivated by those head scratchers where you're like, wait, why did that happen? That's interesting.
Well, that is, and that's again innately curious, open to learning new things. I think those of us that go into every day knowing we're not going to be right all the time. We are going to learn from missteps, mistakes, things we didn't anticipate. That's what's going to help us be better the next time out. And so I think not answering the question aside, which is fine because it's a hot take off the cuff moment. I think you're spot on, Amy. I think that embracing what those surprises are going to be and using them as a learning opportunity for what you do next is probably the most valuable takeaway that anyone in our line of work could have rolling with a new campaign, not knowing what's going to happen and being open to those surprises that inform the next wave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll give you a very recent example to make this more real. Working with a brand, they do very specific promotion. This tiny category is up to this percent off. This tiny category is this percent. And, they're just layered on
Yep.
top of each other.
Right.
And it looks like Kohl's or Macy's sometimes, right?
Sure.
Because there's just so many,
Yep.
right?
Right.
So I said, let's try one that's really broad, a promotion that's really broad, break through the clutter because we've been doing the same thing a lot. And I'm pretty confident at work we'll have a threshold to get the offer, an order threshold to get the offer. 35% off of whatever order threshold. The order threshold was 30. So I was right and surprised in this instance. I was right that the broad offer would work. I think 72% of our sales for that week came in during the 4 days of that offer.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was right about the customer always beating the threshold, right? If you give them 30, they'll go to 40, 45, 50. They went to 80.
Hmm. Yeah.
I was wrong about how high they went. And so the head scratcher, like, what? Well, we featured a very expensive product in all the advertising. And it was a new product that was hot. So, like a couple of retail lessons that are old, like, yes, broad offers work very well if you're doing a ton of category specific offers. Thresholds work, those are all knowns. But just a reminder on an old one, she or he will buy what's featured in terms of retail truisms and things to
Yeah,
leverage for holiday.
right, right. Yeah, so don't be afraid
Don't be
is
afraid.
yeah.
Have a measure of humility. Take
Mhm.
risks and feel strong in your convictions and see what happens.
I love it, and I think that is the perfect place to put a bow on this conversation. So, Amy, thank you so much for your time. It's been a delight talking with you about all of these topics. Is before we sign off, is there anything that you want to plug, or where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, my Gmail address is very simple. It's my first name, last name at gmail.com, amysilino at gmail.com. So I'd love to work with folks out there and help them grow sales. That's kind of my thing. So that's the only plug I have. And I appreciate being here and chatting with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. No, on behalf of everyone at LifeStreet, again, we really appreciate your time and your insights and your expertise. And it's conversations like this that have really helped elevate our platform and give our audience something really interesting to look forward to week after week. So thank you.
Awesome. Happy to help.